4 News.
Welcome back. It's a little more than a month to go until the Israeli elections part 2. So let's have a look at the latest polls. The Channel 12 poll shows Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party is still leading the race with 30 projected seats. The Blue and White Party is a close second with 29 seats. Former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman's Israel Beitenu party looks poised to win 10 seats. Now, this latest poll shows that Israeli voters are still split, and no party has an inside track on forming a 61-seat majority on its own. Likud party member and former mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, says he's looking for a wide coalition to back up the Likud for majority, but stopped short of supporting a unity government.
The only way that we can have a stable government is to have a big, strong Likud joined with the right of center parties and the ultra-Orthodox parties and then expand circles. Otherwise, we will never have a stable government.
Meanwhile, Israel's far-right parties have united under a new name for next month's elections, and the party will be led by a woman, former Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked. Our diplomatic correspondent Mike Wagenheim has more.
Is this the right leader at the right time? Former Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked, head of the United Right Alliance, helped launch the faction's election campaign on Monday night. It started with a rebrand. The combination of 3 parties is now called Yamina, to the right in English. Shaked says they are going to stop Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from forming a government with leftists.
Without a strong and ideological right, Likud will form a government with the left. Whoever wants a right-wing government, there is no alternative but us.
Polling has consistently pointed to a unity government between the right-wing Likud party and center-left Blue and White. Shaked says her party is the true ideological home for right-wing voters and, if big enough after Election Day, can preserve a rightist government.
We understand that only together we can normalize settlement in the West Bank. Only together we can open the Supreme Court to a more diverse discourse and bring democracy back to the people. We understand that only together we can protect the tradition and religion of Israel from the cynical alliance of Lieberman and Lapid.
Mike Wagenheim reporting there. Meanwhile, several right-wing members of the Israeli parliament are saying thanks, but no thanks, to a U.S. congressional effort to allow states to refuse to do business with companies that boycott Israel. Some pundits call it a boycott the boycotters bill, but 21 members of the Knesset wrote a letter last week asking leading Democrats and Republicans in Congress who support the bill to cease and desist in their efforts. That's because the bill also has language supporting a 2-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians, something that the current government of Israel has not yet endorsed. The Knesset members who co-signed the letter say that passing the bill into law could force Israel's hand on that 2-state issue. The bill has already passed the House of Representatives by an overwhelming 398-17 vote. Representatives Ilan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were among the 16 Democrats who voted against the resolution. All right, to discuss all of these developments, I'm joined by Middle East analyst Thane Rosenbaum and Matthew Brodsky, a senior fellow at the Security Studies Group. Thane, let's start with you here in studio. So what do you make of this objection that the language of that bill using the term 2 states may put Israel in some kind of political corner with how this conflict is resolved in the future?
Well, Michelle, we're definitely living through a very different scenario. During the Obama administration, no Israeli Knesset member would have so openly spoken about, well, we don't really believe in the 2-state solution at all. This, I think, is part of the wake of the Trump administration, setting aside the idea that, well, maybe the 2-state solution isn't really a workable solution. And they frame this in terms of the security not only of Israel, but also the United States. The letter says to the congressmen, women, says, look, you know, do you want another unstable, dysfunctional state, terrorist state in the Middle East? So it's not surprising. It's surprising how open it is, but it's not surprising because, you know, the appetite for the two-state solution has been less fierce, and certainly in Israel.
Matt, what's also not surprising, perhaps, is that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has snubbed a visit by Republican Congress members on Tuesday. In fact, he sent lower-level delegates to meet with these Republicans. What do you make of that? Is that a smart move by Abbas?
No, it's not a smart move by Abbas, but he's consistently choosing to do things that aren't smart. And once again, as you're talking about how essentially AIPAC here threw in the language of a two-state solution into this project we're talking about, you have Abbas within the past few days claiming that Palestinians are, of course, Canaanites, continuing to promote mythology, things that aren't real and don't exist, saying that they're going to get rid of all Israeli settlements, inshallah. Now, these are just the viewpoints that continue to butt against reality, and of course, Jason Greenblatt and the rest of the peace team, who are constantly trying to push back to have a peace process that is based on reality, and that's unfortunately not what the Palestinians are. Of course, Israelis are waking up to that, and that's, of course, why you get this type of letter to the U.S. Congress, which is basically saying, you know, what it is.
Thane, I want to shift it to domestic politics in Israel. We just saw a profile there of Ayelet Shaked. How much of a threat is she to Netanyahu, not in terms of pulling votes away from the Likud, well, I mean, rather in terms of pulling votes away from the Likud, because that is something that the Prime Minister seems to be afraid of, that he's trying to consolidate all the right voters to vote for the Likud. He seems to be threatened by Shaked because he told some Likud members that she shopped herself between parties. I'm quoting him. She has no principles and she might not recommend me after the election. So he seems pretty threatened by Shaked.
And yet he's going to need her, because he's either going to need her or Lieberman or both. So she's positioned herself wonderfully because she's become the new leader of the right. I think that he's also afraid that, you know, coming down the road, she's always going to be a competitor, not just in forming a coalition mandate here, but into the future. Is she the new leader of the right?
She didn't even make the threshold with her party with Naftali Bennett last time. They didn't make that 3.25% of the vote threshold. So is he giving her more power than she's due by attacking her, telling Likud members, listen, go after her? And by the way, he gave them a way to go after her by saying compare her to Tzipi Livni, because Tzipi Livni had a reputation of shifting from party to party. He said make that similar kind of comparison.
But Michelle, she's sitting on 11 votes. So at this point, if polling is right, she has 1 vote more than Lieberman. So Netanyahu has something to fear. The thing that's so interesting is that she is the most likely coalition partner, and yet he's alienating her. She's saying, I'll work with Netanyahu, and he may ultimately need her. And she may be more amenable to a coalition than Lieberman. Why? Because she was able to make peace with the religious parties, and Lieberman can't or won't.
Matt, is Ayelet Shaked potentially poised to be the next kingmaker in this election?
It could be, but I mean, the reality is she's playing the long game. It's about what happens after Netanyahu. It's about a battle for succession later. She'll find her way back, I'm sure, into the Likud at some point, and will be in a far stronger position for having played her cards this way. And Thane is exactly right about what she's doing in the short term right now. It seems incredibly unlikely that Lieberman would be part of any form of coalition with Netanyahu. There's a lot of people who don't want to be in a government with Netanyahu, so he has less option. And as you say, it's stranger that he's essentially bolstering her by giving her by speaking about her the way he is. But she'll be well positioned in the future. That's the one thing I think we can all agree on.
All right, and we do show again that the country may be facing deja vu all over again if we look at the results of that poll. Likud still very much in the lead. Thank you so much, Thane Rosenbaum, Middle East analyst, and Matt Brodsky, senior fellow at the Security Studies Group. Appreciate it. All right, still ahead.